and welcome to day 4 of our road trip. Now, day 4 brought us to a really fun area for those who are familiar with Texas. And of course, I'm talking about San Antonio, the land of the Alamo and all the missions. And so I'm going to share with you today our experiences there, along with our experience at the haunted Crockett Hotel. Now, this is part one because in the evening I went and did something, and so I wanted to share that in another live stream for those of you because that was quite an experience, and it will be a could be a long explanation of what was going on. So I don't want to overwhelm you all. But with that being said, we did arrive in San Antonio and we found our hotel right behind the Alamo. So if you're looking for a really cool experience, stay at the Crockett Hotel. It's right next to the Menger and Emily Morgan Hotel, all three of which are haunted. And I will get in that in a few moments. But first, I wanted to share with you all that we did go inside the chapel of the Alamo. It is free to do that. We got to walk around, and when you walk inside now, the chapel, there's a placard on the floor that says that there are an unknown group of men interred there, presumably from the Alamo, which it's hard to believe, but that battle was 300 years ago. And so it's kind of amazing when you think about what happened there and the history of it. And I'll give a brief synopsis of what took place along until March 6th, 1836, when the Alamo fell. It was originally set up as a mission, and there was a huge wall around it that wasn't very tall and wasn't complete in all areas. Some areas had palisades put in to block holes that were in the wall. It was not for sake of military purposes a fortress or a fortification of any kind. This was just happened to be available and was in the middle of Mexico going towards the US. So that's why they wanted to hold this area as long as they could to give Sam Houston time to raise an army to help Texas gain its independence, and has a sordid history of having taken place in the Texas Revolution and being part of the battle cry of Texas. Remember the Alamo, remember Goliad. And when you walk inside, there are little information spots along each side, and you can see what it looked like inside the Alamo for what it looked like in 1836. The only difference is the famous facade archway on the top did not exist back then, and there was no roof. So that's the only two modern renovations to the Alamo. And when walking through, you can see flags that have flown over Texas, and I don't recall if I saw the Republic of Texas flag. I may not have. If for some reason Texas doesn't fly the Republic flag in history, we even have a huge amusement park area called Six Flags of Texas. and they don't fly the Republic of Texas flag, which kind of confuses me, but I guess it's Six Flags over Texas sounds better than Seven Flags over Texas. Maybe that's why they decided to do that. But with that being said, in San Antonio, you can walk around the Alamo facade, chapel, I mean, and you can photograph it. You can take photos inside. They have little rooms. And you can also go to some exhibits and look around to see artifacts that they found or that were donated to the Alamo. And in one section that you walk to is known as the Long Barracks. That is where you can see the room where Jim Bowie was killed during the Battle of the Alamo. And Colonel William Travis was killed in the beginning of the battle. And this battle was historical because it was an incident where roughly 130 to 200 soldiers or frontiersmen or farmers known as Texians or Tejanos may have been in there as well. And they stood up and gave the ultimate sacrifice to keep Texas freedom a possibility. And they were overrun by at least 3,000 Mexican troops. They surrounded the Alamo on all sides and were sneaking in to surprise attack until they got close when. Sorry, I need to take a cough drop. My throat's. I'm trying not to cough during this video. But when they got close to the walls out of sheer training and sheer excitement and adrenaline, they started yelling Viva Santa Ana and alerted the soldiers inside that were asleep. And so they woke up and the battle started. And this location was under siege for 13 days. So you can imagine for for 12 nights having cannons fired over your head all night. And on the 12th night, the night of March 5th, no cannons were firing in the wee hours of March 6th because they were sneaking up. And so soldiers being inside, being sleep deprived and tired, were all asleep. All the watch, everybody, because it takes a toll not being able to sleep with shelling overhead. They were taking advantage of what they thought was a moment's rest. And one of the legends of the Alamo is the famous Travis drawing a line in the sand, which I believe they've kind of historically have now said actually did not take place. But he has written several letters pleading for more support and troops. But the interesting thing was General Sam Houston, trying to build an army, told the defenders of the Alamo to leave the Alamo. It was not strategically able to be held, and to join the Texas Army. And Goliad at this time was had amassed a small militia army of around 130 to 200 men, and so They left trying to get to the Alamo, excuse me, in time to help, and heard that there was a force of soldiers heading towards Goliad. So they turned back to defend their town, and a small group of 13, I believe, soldiers from Goliad did make it to the Alamo the day before the siege ended and the huge battle. So Goliad did end up being represented at the Alamo. There were also Europeans fighting in the Alamo. Davy Crockett was fighting in the Alamo with the famous Tennesseans and Kentuckians, and there were a lot of different cultures being represented in the Alamo. You could say fighting for this land. And one legend says Crockett died in the Alamo fighting like a lion or a tiger. And that was spoken from Colonel Travis's slave. So if you take that account, he died at the Alamo. Now there are accounts that Davy died after the Battle of the Alamo. At the Alamo, he was executed. Now, there is a theory being tossed around, and I kind of look at it from this aspect and kind of think it makes more sense is if you are a general leading an army through a war, you need to fund this. And what's the easiest way to get funding? Take prisoners. And not just any prisoner. Davy Crockett, being a U.S. congressman, would be the ultimate prisoner because the U.S. would pay to have him returned unharmed, and he could help fund the war and keep Mexico. And Mexico could have fought further into Texas and possibly even got more land. They could have invaded Louisiana if they wanted to. But so there are documents that say that Davy Crockett was in a jail in Mexico City. I haven't been able to validate those. So, like I said, it is a theory. It does make sense from the stance of being the president of a nation needing funding. But walking around there, it is amazing that so many people look at the chapel and think this is where the battle took place. And in actuality, the women and children were in the Alamo chapel, and the grounds around the Alamo is where the actual battle took place. So the plaza, as what they call it, if you're looking for the haunted part of the Alamo, that would be where I would suggest you do your investigations. And there are 24/7 Alamo Rangers patrolling the Alamo. It does lock up at 5:30 at night. And if you go in the wee hours, like for example, I was there at 3:30 in the morning coming back from an investigation and nobody was out front. So I was able to take a picture of the Crockett Hotel sign lit up over the Alamo being lit up under the night sky. And it was really cool to get that photo. And talking with some of the Alamo Rangers, I found out that there are reports of seeing the shadow of a cowboy near the long barracks. And one of the Alamo Rangers actually is descendant from someone who fought at the Alamo. So that was really cool to hear that connection. And they said he tends to see more of the shadows than other people. And the shadows have actually been seen a lot during the daytime when they go to lock up. They think someone is still inside the area. And so they're going over to ask them to politely leave and finding out there's nobody there. And so they're like, he laughed and said, yeah, that's when they tend to lock up a little faster because they are like, oh no, I'm not dealing with ghosts. I'm out. So that was a little fun story that I heard about. And when I came to the room, when we were there, when I got back, I found out from Captain Rob, who was stayed back from this one investigation I did because he needed to rest. He wasn't feeling so well from long hours in the car and being in the sun a lot. It can take a toll. So do be cautious about that when traveling to Texas, especially in the summer. But he told me and about an experience, and before I share this experience, I am going to lay a little groundwork on the Crockett Hotel. And it'll make sense why I'm doing it this way when you hear the timeline. So, when checking in, I asked the clerk, that checks you in, is this hotel really haunted? And he kind of laughed and he goes, I don't know if it's haunted, but I've heard that the seventh floor has stories of seeing a ghost and that he's seen orbs around. And so I thought that was kind of cool to hear. And then we went up to our room, got settled in, and I came down to check something with the front desk, and it was a lady this time. And I was asking her, her experiences if it was haunted. And she was telling me, excuse me, about the fourth floor where guests would be calling up and saying, I'm locked out of my room. And she would say, well, what color is the key card showing up when you scan it? And they go, well, it's yellow. And she says, well, you have to call who's inside your room to unlock the door. And she was saying, like, if it was a female, she'd say, you need to call your husband or your boyfriend and tell him to let you in. And they would all be on the phone and saying, I'm traveling by myself. So the spirits were locking people out of their rooms on the fourth floor. So that was interesting to hear about. And we heard a story about an employee that worked there that had an incident. And before I share her part of the story, I'm going to backtrack a little bit and say that before I went to the front desk, Captain Rob and I went into the bar to get an iced tea. Well, in talking with the bartender and another employee that was behind the bar, we were asking if they've had any haunted experiences here. And the main bartender was like, "Oh, I'm new here. I really don't know. Haven't really experienced anything." And another one said, "Well, there was an incident with the elevator." And we said, "What do you mean?" And they said there was a lady who was an employee, one of the maids, housemaids, got in the elevator, fell, and hit the elevator and died there. And so we were like, "Oh wow, that's tragic." And they said, "Yeah." And if you can find the right housemate or housekeeper, some of them are still there from when this happened. So you can get their account of what happened. But we then get back to the room, and Captain Rob gets a message on his phone about, hey, you're at the Crockett. Did you know this was on some paranormal shows and that there's stories of kids running around that aren't there and that an employee died in the elevator? And we were like, wow, we had just heard that. And everybody there was not really wanting to share the paranormal. And I think it's because, you they don't want the stigma of being a haunted hotel, and people don't want to stay there because they're not into having a paranormal experience. But I was like, I'm sharing it as well because it's online. You can find it on different websites. Different people have posted it. It's been on TV shows. So if you want to find its paranormal side, you're going to find it. So that's why I'm sharing this with you. Now, as I had mentioned, I was backtracking from what the lady at the front desk had told me because the experience I got from her was she got in the elevator and the elevator dropped from the seventh floor to the basement where housekeeping keeps everything, and was killed instantly. And so I was like, man, that is really sad and a really tragic way to go. And the interesting thing about this, to wrap up where we started with talking about Captain Rob having this experience while I was gone, was he was telling me about how there was this lady screaming with her kids and her husband, and they were like freaking out. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh man, you missed it. They were in an uproar. And I said, what was this about? Because I mean, was this just they had a bad experience there? Was something wrong with the room and they weren't getting service or something? And he said they got in the elevator and a housekeeper walked up and they shifted to the side and allowed her to get on the elevator with them. And I was like, well, that was nice of the family. And so I was like, so, what's the screaming? He goes, wait for it. They go and they get down to, I'm guessing, the lobby level. And they go and I believe it was husband and wife step out of the elevator. And the kids step to the side to let the housekeeper out. Only there was no housekeeper. They were the only four in the elevator. And so they were freaking out about there being a spirit of a housekeeper in the elevator. And I thought that was so cool that that happened while we were there, because so many times as a paranormal investigator, you hear these claims and they sound so far out there and so cool to experience that it's like, wow, we actually got to experience this. And so, another thing I'm going to add here before I wrap up this video episode is a friend of ours up north, Christy Meyer, recommended a app for us to try on our phone for doing paranormal stuff. It's called Spirit Talker. It's $6 one time charge, and so I was a little weary about it, but I set it next to me while I was setting up my computer because I was going to be doing a show later that night. So I was getting the Wi Fi up and getting everything ready. And as soon as I turned the app on, all of a sudden I was getting like, hello. I'm 150 years old. I was here 300 years ago, and I'm getting these sentences that all fit within where we are in San Antonio. It's like when it said, I was here 300 years. That's the about the time frame of the Alamo. 150 years ago was when the hotel was built. And they were talking about children, they were talking about bad energies around, and I was finding this app was more in tune with where we were than other apps I was looking at, and so I was like impressed, and I actually started using it more, and I'll share more of that in the next video, part 2 of this episode. And also, I used it on another investigation coming up that I'll be sharing here as well. So, thank you all for watching this about the haunted Crockett Hotel. If you get a chance, go stay there. If you want some history, go check out the Alamo. Check out all the relics and everything. Excuse me. They do have cannons there around. They have statues of prominent figures from Texas history there, like Juan Seguin. There's Travis, Bowie, Crockett, and they're scattered around. So check them all out. Give San Antonio a chance. And there are several paranormal teams down there. And I got to meet up with one and finally got to investigate with a team in San Antonio, the Wraith Hunters with Anthony Sabelos. So I will be sharing that in part 2. And I'm looking forward to getting back to San Antonio, where hopefully, if things go right, I'll be able to investigate with Vera Lopez Rincon. She was a guest on my show, as was Anthony. And so it's really cool being on this road trip and getting to meet people who have been on the shows and interacting with them. And I had met Anthony actually at Fear Fest New Orleans 2023. And so it was really cool to finally meet up with him. And so that will be on the next episode. So stay tuned for part 2 of day 4. And I have a few more days to get caught up with. And so hopefully I'll get them all done today and posted. So you all will be current. Thank you all for watching. And do please remember, remember to click the Rumble, the like button, and leave a comment if you like. Everything helps with the algorithms. Thank you so much for all your kindness and support, and I will see you on part 2.